he's gonna write for, I go bucket drum, so he's gonna write for my bucket setup.
That is so cool.
Yeah, yeah, I'm stoked. Yeah, it's May 2nd. Yeah.
And doing the bang.
Yeah, totally. It's the Royal Room.
Yeah, I heard that. That is so cool. So how did that work out?
I couldn't get one May 2nd here. It was too late.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, everybody, thanks for coming. We're going to kick it off. Stephanie Richards and Andrew Drury make up the group Resonant Bodies, and they're going to play a short set. And then Ruby's going to come up and interview them about their work. Andrew grew up in the area. He said just backstage that his life was changed many times on this stage by hearing music, and he said he played on somebody's senior recital years ago, probably in the 90s sometime. So super great to have them. They'll be playing tonight at the Royal Room, opposite a collective of Cornish faculty and myself called the Matrio. They'll be playing, we start up at around 8 o'clock, and there are $8 tickets for students. Just flash your ID and you get in for $8, which is super cheap in Seattle these days. All right, Resonant Bodies. Yay.
Play before we yak. So.
Do you want to kick it off? Maybe? Let's see how you feel.
Can you hear me? Good out? Sweet. Well, thank you guys on behalf of Cornish. We're so stoked to have you guys.
Awesome to be here.
Sweet. Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you.
Gonna get all the juicy stories.
Okay.
We don't have time for the amount of questions that I have for you, especially after I watched that. There's so many. I guess to start off, oh, there I am. What's up? I read something that you wrote, which really stuck out to me, which was embracing the continuum from tradition to exploration, which as a current music student, I'm sure I'm in good company, it's a constant concern, you know, to understand, preserve tradition, which I would love to hear what the word tradition means to you guys, while also pursuing, you know, exploration, what would be considered the new, truth, individuality. So with that in mind, maybe we could just get to know both of you a little bit, and then where you came from, tradition, and what we just saw. Whoever wants to.
Yeah. Wow, man, we could talk about this for so long.
There's
It's
not
such a
enough
great
time.
question. Well, to directly address this question about tradition, I want to say that when I moved to New York, I was very lucky to kind of come in under the mentorship of Butch Morris. Do you guys know who Butch Morris is? Yes, yes. He created a wonderful language, essentially a way of composing collectively and organizing music through a sign language of sorts, a musical sign language. But I remember Butch kind of took me under his wing when I got to New York, and he said to me one night after we playing, he looked me in the eye, and I remember he was so intent, and he was just like, we have to move this thing forward. We have to move this thing forward. And I keep trying to. That's how I feel, and I think that, you know, your question about truth and individuality, for me it seems pretty simple. It's there's not really a choice, right, when you're playing. There's you play, and that's what you are, and that's who you are. At least that's how I feel, especially when I'm improvising. I don't think there's any choice, and in some way I feel almost not responsible for what happens, because it's almost that my body has information that needs to be played.
Totally.
If that makes this yeah. Okay, so let's start with that.
Right on, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Andrew.
Okay, I'll chime in on this. I guess when I began, I was just entranced by the best drummers I heard were Max Roach and Jack DeJohnette, Tony Williams, Ed Blackwell.
Ed Blackwell.
And I was just, wow. And not only the drummers, but the horn players and people, they were just, what they did was like magic to me. And I wanted to do what they were doing. That was like very amazing. So how could I learn this? So I would say at that point, I was entirely kind of de facto pursuing what I'd call tradition. But I didn't have any sort of, I wasn't thinking of it in an intellectual way, or that here, this is the course I want to go through or something. It was just more intuitive and struggling to find my ability to play the drums, which was very difficult for me. And then, so like I was kind of beginning around, I was probably 14 or 15, and that would be late 70s, early 80s, I was getting serious about it, drumming. And then I got to study with Ed Blackwell for a number of years. And that's what took me from the Seattle area up until high school over to the East Coast. And then I was back in Seattle for a few years in the 90s, and then I finally moved to Brooklyn. And I keep going back and forth. Then, 2002, I had a gig in Vancouver, and Wally Shoup, a Seattle saxophonist, and I drove up to Vancouver, and we played this gig, and the cello player, Peggy Lee, showed up at the gig, and she was really the one I wanted to play with. I was very interested in playing with Peggy, and she left her pickup at home, and so we were gonna have to do the gig with her unamplified. And I'd done enough playing in Seattle with Brent Arnold, who I saw was just here. I played with him a ton, and Laurie Goldston, and there were probably some other people. Anyway, I'd done enough playing with cello players. I knew I was too loud, and we would never hear the cello, and this was a disaster. So if it was going to work, I'd have to figure out something else that I don't do. And I thought, well, a good drummer, I bet like Jack DeJohnette or Bob Moses or some of these other people I'd heard over the years, I bet they could really make some good music happen. And so I kind of set out to copy them, like what my idea of what they might do. So I started making really quiet sounds, and scratching, and rubbing things. And there's another piece of this. The other piece was, I knew that cello players, they already had to adapt their sound so much by going through a pickup and a guitar amp to play with me, and the resulting sound was not like an acoustic cello, which is this very warm, round, big sound. It's just beautiful. So if they were having to accommodate to play with me in the first place, it was only fair that I maybe do some accommodation of my sound to play with her. Anyway, after the gig, I was like, holy cow, it wasn't like a great gig or anything, but I was like, that was the tip of the iceberg. There was a lot of music to be made with these kind of alternate, quiet sounds. So that led me to a whole bunch of other things, of like the techniques I was using there, and you'd call that maybe experimental or whatever, but depends how you define the tradition, because there's a great tradition of just using the materials in situations that you find yourself present with and trying to optimize those. So that's probably how instruments got invented in the first place, I think. So I don't know. It's a continuum.
Yeah, definitely. And you that story was, you said you had to accommodate to players. When you have to adapt to your surroundings, to go back to what you said, do you still, like, it's not your fault, do you still like feel like it's completely yourself, even when like you are playing for someone else, you have to accompany? Or like even in situations, I'm sorry, I'm a stalker, I know everything about you guys. Like with Asphalt Orchestra, which is something that Stephanie is, it's not an orchestra necessarily, more of like a big band type of party, awesome,
like a marching,
good time.
like a
yeah.
music marching band.
Sure. Yeah. I guess my question is, can you completely feel like yourself in any musical setting, even when you are playing someone else's music according to them, and you have to play it in a very specific style? Does that make sense?
Do you want to? I'm curious to hear your answer, and then I'd love to also.
Yeah.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah. I mean, I love playing all kinds of stuff. So sometimes I do what you just heard kind of stuff, and other times I was just telling somebody the other day, I'm not happier than when I have a cowbell in my hand and there's a big band. I'm just playing boom, ba-da, da-da, di-di, 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 with some groove, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's amazing. I love that. I won't say a bad word. Stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, I feel like my full personality is present. Maybe that's kind of what I'm shooting for. It's still very true to who I am and how I hear things, because I spend a lot of time listening to cowbells and studying different kinds of percussion. So it's maybe you can't identify it as closely with, like, if I'm blowing on my faucet escutcheon that I got from a construction job in Bremerton. I can probably say no one else in the world does that, and so that's, I suppose, very personal. But to me, playing the cowbell is the same thing, and like striking a kind of creating originality or experimentation or innovation. It was never what drove me. I wanted to play, just learn to play, and in a very practical way, it's kind of led in different directions, I guess, given my ears and just love of what other people's creativity is about and influences and stuff. So.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah. It is a good question, though, to ask about, you know, how do we navigate as musicians, you know, the type of music that we play. Sometimes we play music because we want to and we love it. Sometimes we play it because we need to pay rent, right? I mean, that's part of survival. But I think it's important not to confuse this idea of taste with style, because I can find such joy, just as Andrew was saying, in so many different ideas or genres or types of music. I also, you know, all my, from a early on age, I studied classical music up and through my first master's degree. And I still find a lot of joy interpreting works of other composers. And I find a lot of joy working even with other jazz musicians who, you know, will compose music that I might not typically be associated with. I tend to play, I'm very interested in a lot of timbral work and lots of open improvisations, but I also really love playing different conceptualizations of harmony, you know, working with the way Henry Threadgill thinks about harmony versus a few weeks ago Wayne Horowitz had this really incredible music. So interpreting as an improviser, I think, is a really interesting idea. And I've tried my best to be as open as possible as I can, because there's always a lot of beauty hiding in the shadows. Sometimes you have to look a little harder. That being said, I do, and I know some of you are in school, and I think it's also important to be, to welcome criticisms or things that you like and don't like, and really question, well, what is it that I love about this piece of music? What is it that really I disagree with? You can dislike something but still find it highly interesting, right? So I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can be kind of working through these questions of identity and choice and interpretation. But,
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to remind myself, asking myself why I don't like something before just like bragging. I didn't like that.
Right, it's very valuable.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot more to be said, but before I forget, maybe you guys want to play a little more and I'll come back up?
Okay.
Sounds good?
Cool.
Thanks, Rudy.
Thank you.
That's the drum. Thought something was speeding back.
Oh, you're going for that, huh? It's gonna require a mute change.
Oh, well then.
Well, no.
It's like a chess match.
It's true. It should be. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, the magic green light's on. Yeah.
Go.
So real quick, why is it like a chess game?
Oh, it was just an offhand joke of like, I grabbed one thing and I guess she knows some sounds that it does, so, oh, use a different mute, and I'm like, well, okay, I mean, if you're gonna do that move, I'm gonna do this.
Okay. So you guys know what sounds work with each other's materials, what mutes work with whatever have you?
She can speak for herself, because this is kind of news to me, but no, I'm just using my ears and relating it somewhere over here, and I'm hearing and thinking about other stuff. So I don't necessarily think, oh, she's going to play into the snare drum with the bell unmuted. Now I need to go to a lower frequency, and so I'm going to go to I'm not quite thinking, maybe 5% of the time I think like that, but not too much.
Sure, I think sometimes, from personal experience, drummers tend to be like, I'm playing with this player and he's really loud, so I have this ride cymbal, so I'll bring this ride cymbal to the gig, and he's more a type of this player, so I'll bring that snare drum because it's more a pop sound,
Sure, those could be really valid approaches, definitely. Some gigs, one kind of drum set works better than another, and different, okay, I'm gonna play a lot of grooves this gig, or he likes to improvise in this way, or they like to do this kind of thing, and you're always, I think, interacting and reacting.
Sure.
Can I say something about that?
Oh, please.
Because for me, it's actually really, I tend to close my eyes a lot when I'm improvising, but I'm also, I do like to feel what's happening, whether I'm, I have my eyes open or not. Because I think that we're improvising, but we're always composing, and I'm always thinking orchestrationally. And I think that having a sense of what kind of palette Andrew's going to be accessing at a certain time is important for me to know and be responding to. And sometimes I'll know in advance because I'm looking at him, and sometimes my eyes are closed and I won't know in advance, but as soon as I hear something, I know that, okay, I can work with this other palette of colors. Or I can stay with my current palette, but I know how that's going to be in dialogue with this type of orchestration. But it is really important to me to think compositionally and about how I'm improvising.
Yeah, now that you say it, I totally agree. And it kind of happens at an intuitive level. I think the deeper you get into the practice of it.
Yeah. And speaking of practice, that's why, and I'm curious to know what your opinion is about this, but I think that to me it's important if it's completely open improvisation, I much prefer to work with that person quite a bit. So I wouldn't necessarily call it practicing. Some people might. I just call it playing. But it's important to me to play a lot. And I think that we shouldn't take for granted what the idea of open or free improvisation could potentially mean. Because the more that you play with someone, the deeper that dialogue and that communication and that composition itself can become. So it is very important to me to work with somebody so that I have a deeper sense of what are all the palette of colors that Andrew has, and what are all the possibilities, and where do things go. And I'm constantly surprised. That's one thing I love about working with Andrew, is there's always something new. Sometimes I have to open my eyes and be like, what on earth is that? Where is it coming from? But it's really important to me to have that time, if possible. I mean, this is 2018.
Yeah,
but
and we're humans. We're social animals when you get down to it. So it's about relationships as well, and who's in the room listening, and the sound of the room, like everything.
Yeah. To comment on what you just said, watching just now, I was wondering specifically to Resonant Bodies, what is your relationship with the audience?
They're hard to see because we've got these lights in our faces.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, just every time you play, are you thinking about them? Do you get to know them as you're playing? Do they affect you?
I don't know. It kind of depends. I probably go different ways, but it's in some way it's always important to me to sort of play the room. So as a drummer, I can be just dominant and obnoxious if I play too loud in a boomy room. So I got to be really careful. and then I quiet down and wow, good music happens. But just being sensitive, I guess, and kind of you're aware who's in the room, but then you want to forget too, because I don't know if you know Greg Campbell and Tom Varner are out there listening to you. You might get intimidated. But
Biggest critics.
But no, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. There's some Zen way of fitting yourself into a situation, and I feel like the sort of older I get and maybe more experience, the more kind of intuitively that happens, and I'm sensing various things, and then using that too. Like I know, like man, these guys, this gig is kind of lame. I need to, like the previous band, maybe I didn't like, or maybe these guys are here doing this, and I'm going to start off, I'm going to just scare the shit out of everyone. Bam!
Yeah.
You know, and just kind of break whatever the expectations are and work with some surprise kind of elements or something. And other times it might be like, okay, I'm going to do the subtlest little sound, and people are going to have to quiet down to hear what I'm going to do. And I think they'll do that if I go really quiet. So I don't know. It's just like, that's another level of improvising, I think.
Sure, absolutely. And the audiences are, I think, like integral. As an improviser, it's integral. It's a part of the music. It's a part of the composition that's happening in the space, in some sort of embodied sense that we can all feel each other, we can sense each other, and so an audience is very, very important to me. And actually, I find that different stages and different venues, either increase or decrease that sense of collectivity that we have in a room. And so stages such as this, there's a distance between where we're at and where the audience is, and we have lighting, people are obscured, and so there's these things that kind of make the audience, invisible to me. It's harder for me to really kind of see you here, and sometimes that can aid in the fantasy of a performance. If you're sitting in an audience and you're in the dark, you can almost disappear yourself, and that's part of the fantasy of it. But I love being able to feel an audience, and so playing a smaller space, playing a room where maybe there is no height difference between the stage and the audience. I love just those structures. I think that they really are conducive to engagement in a musical sense.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, I'm a stalker, so just to bring back Asphalt, I mean, which is a marching band that Stephanie has co-founded. I mean, watching videos of you guys online, it's like complete party vibe. I mean, like from the ones that I saw, like everyone is just like screaming the words to like the Pixies covers and everything. And then you play shows like this where you can't see the crowd.
Yeah.
And I find myself in similar situations and having maybe a mindset of how the show is gonna go, or a mindset of how like I'm gonna start it, like I'm gonna mess with everyone, and I get there and I'm like, oh man, that's gonna go terribly.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
so you are, I guess, kind of consciously thinking before you get on stage of how you're gonna articulate what you're gonna say, more maybe.
Depends, I
Yeah.
think. Every situation, I would say, is kind of different, and sometimes, like you say, you have a plan, and then, whoop. I mean, I think I did that the other day. I was playing in Brooklyn. Yeah, we rehearsed some music quite a bit. We had 2 rehearsals and really shed it on it. We got to the venue, and we were like, let's just improvise.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
that's what we did.
Right on. Yeah. Before we run out of time, I just want to get some questions from the audience real quick, because I have lots more. If you don't have any, I can't see you guys, so maybe you should just shout. But maybe not. What's up, Alex? Or do I need to give him the mic?
For you.
No, that's cool. Just
Okay. What's up?
So Ruby told me you've played trumpet across kind of just a bunch of different like genres and contexts and everything. What have been some of your like favorite settings, like performance-wise and also like recording-wise? Like who have been some people you've worked with that have like really influenced you and like resonated with you?
That's a really nice question. There's too many to name, I think. But two that come to mind, one is very recent, because you mentioned being in a recording studio. And so Henry Threadgill has a new project coming out, and we were in the studio in September. And this session, you know, we were in there for a couple days, and it was I think there's maybe 12 of us. It was a larger group. And so Henry was doing more conducting, kind of hanging, and he would play kind of inside the section. And it wasn't until the very last day, the last hour, the very end of this, you know, really, really intense recording session, that he had a kind of, he pulled out his horn for a completely solo moment. And the room, he was a force. That's the only way I can articulate this. There was a force in the room. There was a presence. Something about his being and the way he was making the music. It moved me, and it was a force in the room. And there really are no other words for it. And so I don't know. I can't articulate what I learned from it, except that I was there to experience it and feel it, and that will carry me. And the other one is actually playing. So I've had a stint. I became friends with Dennis Leary, the comedian, and he has like a rock band. It's kind of a comedy rock band. And so I would, you know, play backup horns every now and then for kicks. And so we had this one gig in New York City, and Steve Tyler was playing a song right before we went on. And that was another moment in my life as a musician where he was very quiet backstage, and, you know, kind of a small, quiet, nice man.
The Aerosmith dude?
The Aerosmith dude. Yeah. And I was standing right next to him before he went on stage, just because of the positioning of wherever I had to stand. And he was so quiet and slow, and suddenly he crossed this line between backstage and on stage, and he turned into a crazy person, and the entire room, it got hot, like, so quickly. And it was like magic, and that's, you know, the idea of stage presence, and seeing a master of stage presence like that firsthand, and seeing that crossover was really exciting and inspiring for me.
Cool.
And surprising.
Yeah, that's so cool. Really quick, before we get to more questions, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Cafe Racer, the Racer series. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a struggle to. I'm not sure if you're familiar. So.
Nope.
It's basically experimental avant-garde session that happens every Sunday night, and there's always a host, and it can be a local artist or a touring artist, and then afterwards it's just a session for open improvisation, which is many of ours, like church, basically. It's been a struggle to keep it alive recently, and I would love for you to tell us about Soup and Sound and the Continuum Culture and Arts, all of that, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Soup and Sound came first. It's a house concert series I do at my house in Brooklyn, and I don't know. From long ago, I liked traveling a lot, and the first time I went to Europe with my own band, it was a trio. Me, Chris Speed, and Myra Melford, and we played. I could only get us one gig in Portugal, so I was so excited to go to Europe for the first time, but I just had one gig. That wasn't. I wanted to do more, so I set up. It was kind of when it was around 2002, and connecting on the web seemed kind of new to me anyway. So I found out who were musicians in Lisbon and Madrid and Barcelona and Toulouse. I knew about Toulouse through a friend of mine, Jane Rigler, who's going to be at the Seattle Improvised Music Festival. You should all check out. Jane's great. Anyway, I connected with people and sort of get gigs, and I'd stay at their houses, and we'd hang out during the day. It was fabulous. And through that and other times of my traveling, I was the beneficiary of a lot of hospitality and generosity of people sharing their space and food and language and let's go see this and this guy, and I learned so many things. And then when I moved, this didn't happen to me when I lived in Seattle, but New York is such a crossroads, so there's always musicians coming from Europe and going to other places or coming to New York just to be there. And we'd always be doing sessions. Eventually I have a construction background, so I knocked down walls in my house and opened up this space, and at that point we could start inviting people to come over to listen to our sessions. And that was sort of how Soup and Sound House Concert Series began, but also when I lived in Seattle, there was a real kind of culture of, we'd have potlucks and get together with friends and have food together. In New York, that never happened. It's always, if I get together with people, it's at somebody's gig, and everyone's busy, and it's just, I don't know, somehow it's not part of it. But so I have my kind of internalized Cascadia thing that I carry with me in New York, because I didn't move there till I was 35, and or something like that. So I was pretty much a Seattle person no matter where I go at that point. And so Soup and Sound kind of embodied that as well. And it's really cool because I have a house and I'm just pinching myself that that's one of the kind of material, practical facts of my life. And so I have this venue where I can bring people and I don't have to worry about maybe the bartender's an obnoxious guy or this backline stuff sucks or whatever. There's a lot I don't have to worry about. And of course it's got limitations because my family lives there and it's my house and stuff. But I have a very sort of collective communal mentality toward community. So I really like having people come through my space and people staying there and stuff. And it just feels like part of something I get to benefit from when I travel, and I like providing that for people. So that's sort of what Soup and Sound's about. We've done 100 house concerts, 102 I think, and I've made a big pot of soup for everyone. And I may suck as a drummer, but I can make some serious soup at this point. And it's a variety of people from, like, you know, in the unknown. I remember there was a guitar player from Melbourne once who came through, and there's other people I didn't really know before I said yes to having them play, and those were great experiences. And then Howard Johnson played there. Jake Clayton, who I used to hear right here in this room, she played there, and a lot of European well-known folks. And then that whole thing, that whole process really sustains me. I enjoy doing it. I don't know how much time we have left.
No, we're good. We've got 7 good minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll say just shortly then,
Please.
eventually I started a 501c3, a nonprofit group, and it's called Continuum Culture and Arts. And it's sort of a way to take advantage of this, I don't know, tax-free structure. And it's funny, it's just kind of psychologically, it sounds better to a lot of people and organizations. It's not just Andrew Drury talking to us, some drummer, but it's a nonprofit organization that's doing this. So I think it's just kind of a tool for particularly artists to kind of initiate their own stuff. And man, we need all the help we can get. So that exists. I'm trying to take advantage of it.
Nice, man. Thank you so much. That's so cool. I think we should all follow them online. You guys have that website. I don't know if you have a Facebook or anything.
Yeah, Continuum's got one. We're both on Facebook. We both have websites. Soup and Sound has a website. Yeah. And I love making friends, real as well as virtual. So talk to us and pull our coat.
Noted.
And we have CDs too if you want. I don't know if anyone here listens to CDs this day and age, but I'm glad I put them there just to remind myself anyway they exist.
Awesome.
They're great.
This is Resonant Bodies or your own works?
Resonant Bodies, yeah, we have
Yes.
a new pre-release. Hot off the press.
Oh.
I do want to say something that, you know, Andrew's talking about cultivating a community, and I've also worked to do that in New York with another organization. We were kind of talking about curation and that idea of it on the drive up here. And for myself, it's with a trumpet festival called the Festival of New Trumpet. If there's any trumpet players here, let me know. Send me your stuff. Okay, good. And I really believe that the only way that we're all going to survive here as artists and musicians, because it's a really hard thing to do, and it seems to be harder. It feels like it sometimes. And I think we need to carry each other through, and we have to support each other. And the only way that it's going to keep going is if we keep presenting each other and provide the spaces, whatever resources we each have. Andrew has a house, and he's really good at soup. And so, and there's a really important space now in a neighborhood in Brooklyn that everybody knows to go and hang and hear amazing music. And so, in all the ways that we can, it's so hard just to make it on your own, but I think if we all kind of carry each other, you know, along the way, go to each other's shows, etc. You probably know all this, but I just wanted to put that into the air. I think that's the way we're gonna be able to keep surviving here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you. Any more questions?
I'd like to ask, Stephanie, I'm thinking about your work at UCSD, and I wonder if you could just talk about how you see this moment in music education. Like, you're working with students, you're helping to create a program and so forth. And it feels to me, being involved in the work, like we're in a pretty transitory moment, a moment that is ripe for change. There are programs all over the country, all over the world saying, okay, we're done teaching music theory the way we've done it for 100 years. We're done teaching music history the way we've done it. But the question is, what's next? Like, and there's different people trying different things. But I'm just wondering if you would just ruminate on how you're seeing music education right now, your role in it, what's changing, what's happening at your institution, in any way you want to take that question.
That's a really great question. I think that I mean, it really kind of comes back to the other thing I was saying about communities and carrying each other forward. I think going to school, you go to school to be with other people, and you go to school to study with teachers. I know when I was looking at for an undergrad, it was all about, oh, I want to study with this particular teacher, and then you get there and you realize that you're actually studying with all of your colleagues and your classmates, because you're all in it together and you're in rehearsals together and you're griping about Theory 101 or whatever it is that you're taking. No offense to theory, I actually love teaching theory as it changes its curriculum. Yes, but yeah, the truth is you get out of school and the people, the gigs you're gonna get are gonna come from your friends and the people that you were good to and that were good to you. And so I think going to school is much more about the community that you're creating, the people that you're playing with. You have kind of a safe space to experiment and try different things and keep your ears open to learn new things. But essentially it's the people that you're getting out of that degree, I think. Yeah. Does that kind of a little bit answer the question?
Yeah.
Were you looking for?
And so would you advocate for opening up then to more chances to do that, right? Less time, less structured time, and more time for connecting. Absolutely,
yeah. And I think having student-created ensembles, for example, is like one really important way. I went to Cal Arts, which is a really open school. There's really not a lot of structure built into that program, and it allowed for space and encouragement to, for example, you get there and you are a jazz improviser, but suddenly you find yourself in the animation department and you're hanging out with animators for 6 months, and then suddenly you've created all this incredible music for animation, right? And there was space to acknowledge other forms of art, especially performative arts and collaboration, and I think that was because the course structure was really open, and I think that's important in school. It's things are changing, like you're saying. I think there's the conservatory model is there's just no jobs in an orchestra anymore, and so the way we talk about music, the way we hear music, the way we learn theories of music, I think is changing, and it's really exciting. And it's important to hit to breaking a lot of the hierarchies and the structures that have existed for so many years, especially in jazz. Yeah.
Word. Yeah.
I don't know if I should say more about that or not.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, that's talking about talking about tradition and exploration, especially as a jazz studies major. I'm in a constant state of existential crisis, as any college student ever. But and I see it changing in a lot of new younger teachers. I feel like it's really important for younger people to start teaching now more than ever. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think what's going on with like the Me Too and Trump and all these other things, hopefully this is a transitional moment in some important ways. So.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. We need it.
We needed that. And I think that we don't have a choice as musicians to, not reflect that. I think that when you're on a stage, no matter what art form, you're making a political statement within itself.
Yeah, for me, I feel like the choice to be a musician rather than, I don't know, I was raised around people. I could have been some business guy or lawyer or something. And
Construction work.
construction, yeah, absolutely construction. That scared the hell out of me. Yeah, I feel like it's a political choice and a statement every time I'm doing something crazy. Like, why would you do something aesthetic in this world? We need, I don't know, we need to make a profit. We need jobs. I don't know what, but anyway. Yeah, I hear you.
Right on. Yeah. Any more questions, real quick? Nothing.
All right, well, we should probably end it there, being 1 o'clock. Tonight, Royal Room, come check them out some more. Thanks to Ruby for being a great host.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ruby.
Thank